Hey everyone, welcome to Question Period Rewind. I'm Donna Skelly, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Let's go back to 1986. That's the year when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted its first batch of musicians. Among them, the iconic Ray Charles, Buddy Holly, and of course, Elvis Presley. Tina Turner was also receiving praise in California, where her star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame was revealed. And if you turned on the radio, there's a good chance you'd hear Madonna's #1 hit, Papa Don't Preach. But now, let's tune into the conversations the MPPs were having in Question Period.
Oral questions. The Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I have a question for the Premier which relates to a number of people, specifically both women and injured workers, who today are much worse off in the healthcare system than they were several months ago. I want to begin by asking about the Workers' Compensation Board problem. The Premier no doubt will be aware of the fact that doctors are currently refusing to see and make reports on behalf of injured workers in order that their claims may be processed and they may be adequately and fairly dealt with. This is a direct result of two things. One, the Ministry's refusal to renegotiate the contract which expired on April the 1st last, and secondly, the interpretation put on Bill 94. Could the Premier tell the injured workmen of this province what he intends to do on their behalf to sort out this problem which his government created?
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Labour can bring the honourable member up to date on that situation.
The Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the honourable member certainly has raised a matter which would be of concern to us because we want to ensure that injured workers continue to get their claims approved as quickly as possible and remain on the rolls of the WCB for the appropriate time possible. And I do know that there has been a concern raised by the Ontario Medical Association, and we're very anxious in the government that there be no interruption of the service between the physicians and the WCB. Mr. Speaker, essentially there is no problem at all in terms of the rates of remuneration. We have taken a fairly careful look at this, and we have obtained a number of legal opinions, both from within government and from without, and they are unanimous that the wording of the Workers' Compensation Act allows the payments to continue at the rate that they are being paid now, and that's approximately, if memory serves me correctly, about 98.5% of the Ontario Medical Association rate. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is correct as well when he says that the present agreement between the board and the OMA ran out at the end of March of this year. There have been some preliminary discussions, Mr. Speaker, between the parties because of a number of other matters that have been going on in the last few months. The discussions have not been substantive, but I understand that the board will be approaching the OMA to see if those discussions can resume very shortly.
Supplementary.
Well, my question to the Minister is this. Bill 94 was passed several weeks ago. You and your government knew that 94 was about to be passed, and since April the 1st, nothing's been done to renegotiate the contract. As recently we are informed as this morning, Dr. Elgee was telling those who were attending a meeting to try and resolve this that the advice he had been given was that indeed 94 did prevent and prohibit the expenditure that you're talking about. Now, how can you have arrived at this sort of circumstance with all this advance notice and today be standing here as minister giving one story when the injured workers and the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board are under exactly the opposite impression? What's going on here?
Well, Mr. Speaker, with respect, I don't believe that the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board is under any illusions or is under that point of view at all. I had a chance to have some discussions with Dr. Elgee this morning as we very carefully reviewed the opinions that we have received as to the impact of Bill 94 as they pertain to Section 52.7 of the Workers' Compensation Act. We believe that it is very clear if one looks at the legislation and the fact that the OHIP schedule, which is dealt with in the very narrow sense of Bill 94, applies for payments for treatment under the Health Insurance Act. And I'm sure the honourable member would know, Mr. Speaker, that the WCB services are expressly excluded as an insured service. And consequently, in a sense, Bill 94 simply upholds that exclusion. So we believe that the payments that have been made up until now and will continue to be made biweekly are quite right and quite proper. And of course, as I indicated in my first answer to the first question, Mr. Speaker, they are subject to adjustment as soon as the parties can sit down and negotiate an adjustment to those services.
Final supplementary.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you the interpretation of Bill 94, which, to put it at its mildest, is obviously open to so much division of opinion with regard to the impact that the injured workers and others now face, 2 weeks, 10 days since the bill was passed, and still a lot of confusion surrounds that issue. My question to the Minister is this, and I must say it would be more appropriately addressed to the Premier, who refers these questions elsewhere, is that whichever interpretation is right, and we believe you have a large problem facing it, the fact is that on April 1st, the schedule your ministry refused to renegotiate the schedule. Now, if you believe that Bill 94 had no bearing whatsoever on the WCB payments, can you explain to this House why you, the Premier, and the Minister of Health did nothing whatsoever to renegotiate that schedule from April 1st on?
Minister.
Well, the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, the honourable leader of the opposition may have forgotten the small fact that it isn't the Premier, the Minister of Health, or the Minister of Labour that negotiates with the Ontario Medical Association. It's the Workers' Compensation Board of Directors. And those discussions, Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions between the parties. There have been discussions, and in fact, the Ontario Medical Association has indicated the kind of adjustment to the fee schedule.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, I would only say to the honourable leader of the opposition that if this government gave direction of any kind in these matters, it certainly wouldn't be to direct the kind of very sloppily worded agreement that has just expired, that the former government helped give direction on.
Order. Order. New question. Order. New question, the member for Sarnia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Premier. Mr. Premier, I have some information I'd like to share with you today, and I have it written out so that you'll have an opportunity to peruse it. Mr. Premier, you have asked if, in fact, the Minister of Northern Development and Mines did in some fashion benefit from his ownership of Golden Tiger, the mining development company that we have been discussing in this House for a matter of the last week or so. Mr. Premier, the information that I have provided you with today will indicate that the shares of Golden Tiger were trading in July of 1985, immediately following the Minister's appointment to Cabinet, at approximately 40 cents per share. It will further indicate that no move was made to divest any of those shares from the Minister's ownership in escrow or by way of a blind trust that he had set up, and that a divestiture of those shares could in fact have taken place prior to the end of the year, but no such divestiture occurred. It's interesting to note that the shares, I'll be getting to the question very quickly.
Question, please.
It's interesting to note the shares hit an all-time high towards the end of December of 1985 when the minister decided to sell those particular shares at double the amount of money that they were trading at in July of 1985. Will the minister now admit that there is a way in which will the Premier admit that there is a way in which the minister could, in fact, derive some benefit from the appreciation of those shares?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think there's ever any question that, that we established already in this House that shares can go up or down or stay the same. Whether there's any direct action the minister took that influenced the outcome of the shares, I have no idea. But the honourable member presented with me 4 pages of information, and he may have something that I'm not aware of, and I think that these are very appropriate matters to bring up in the committee, and I know that the honourable member will want to do that and try to establish whether, in fact, there was some untoward influence exercised.
Supplementary.
Well, can the Premier indicate how it would be possible, after various cabinet ministers have indicated the very severe screening process that you put them through, that these shares could remain in the hands of one minister and be allowed to be retained under ownership for that period of time and only be sold, sir, when they reach the peak level of the stock market?
Premier. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what was paid for the shares and on the chronology of the value of the shares, and the honourable member has brought some information to bear today. I frankly have no explanation for the things that you're alleging here, one way or the other. But I do think that these facts have to come out, and you obviously have a point to make, presumably that he received some sort of a benefit for it, and I think that you should take that information to the committee and put forward your proposition, your charge, the appropriate place to do so.
Well, order. Order.
I have to...
Order. Order. Does the member for Brantford have a supplementary? The member for Sarnia, final supplementary.
Stand up there and pretend you don't know anything.
We fully intend, Mr. Premier, to bring these matters before the committee, but why is it that in advance of the committee hearings, you have already cast a shadow of doubt on the validity of those hearings by indicating it doesn't matter one whit what comes out of those hearings? You intend to reappoint this minister to the cabinet, irrespective of what information, what evidence, what truth comes out in those hearings. How can you possibly take that position?
Premier.
I say to the honourable member, I don't think I took that position. We were discussing in this House, and as you know, the number of allegations have been made, the point of the escrowed shares, and I acknowledge in this House and other places that there's clearly a technical violation. There's an explanation for... Oh, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's interesting. The honourable member from York Centre is castigating the third party for making noise when he was speaking, Mr. Speaker. You may want to speak to your own colleagues and use some of the same adjectives. But I'm trying to give the honourable member an explanation for this. And, Mr. Speaker, I said at that time that I acknowledged a technical violation in that respect. It was a gray area. On the basis of the facts as I knew them, I laid forward my view of the situation. Now, if you have other information and every day you're trying to make new charges in the House, which is your right to do so, I would recommend you take all of this information to the committee and you try to establish your point that he benefited from his position. You may have evidence of that. You may have new facts that will come to bear on the situation, and obviously I will have to govern myself accordingly.
New question. The member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, I must a question to the Premier on this very subject. I'd like to ask the Premier if he can explain, with due respect to my colleague Gumshoe Brant, the information that is being presented. The information that is being provided to the House is information which would hardly be difficult for a process of cross-examination and fairly persistent review of public sources could disclose. I'd like to ask the Premier if he can explain why from day to day he continues to come into the House and is surprised by the presentation of information that I would have thought would have clearly been available to the Premier on the basis of the cross-examination, which he himself has publicly stated on a number of occasions his cabinet had to go through. No stone, I gather, was left unturned according to the Kingston Whig Standard. According to all the sources, you yourself have stated very clearly how tough the process was. I'd like to ask the Premier, how can you explain your failure to gather very basic information with respect to the disposal of assets by a cabinet minister that are publicly available?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member points to, obviously, either my inadequacy or an inadequacy of the system, and I acknowledge that now. Perhaps if we'd had a tighter cross-examination of the members, reminding them of some things that they may have slipped their memory at that point, but a more extensive and rigorous situation, maybe we would have avoided these situations. Obviously, the amount of money is not as significant in any of these cases. And obviously, no one just joining the Executive Council wants to walk into a situation like this overtly. And I think what the honourable member does is point out some flaws in the system to which I have to take some responsibility. Obviously, I wish we had done better a year ago. I hope that in our study of this situation, through Mr. Aird and others, that we will have an opportunity to develop systems so this never ever happens again. I can tell you, I don't think that any minister in his or her mind was attempting in any way to beat the system. But somehow or other, there were some mistakes made, it appears, and it would have been in everyone's interest to have these cleared up a year ago. I hope we can develop a system this will never happen again.
Supplementary?
Well, Mr. Speaker, given the number of mistakes, it's hard to understand the Premier's boasting last week that regardless of what happened, after August the 14th, René Fontaine would be back in the cabinet. That's the statement that's hard for all of us to accept. I'd like to ask the Premier, if it can be established that Mr. Fontaine told Mr. Paul Martin, the president of Golden Tiger, that he was personally reluctant to sell the shares, and Mr. Martin has stated to a reporter that he had to convince Mr. Fontaine that those shares should be sold. And if it can be demonstrated that the value of those shares went up precisely because Mr. Fontaine delayed the selling of those shares, would you still persist in saying that Mr. Fontaine should be automatically reappointed on August the 15th?
Premier? Mr. Speaker, the answer to the honourable member is no, if there are new facts in this circumstance. And I gave you I gave you on the basis of the facts as I ascertained them a week or so ago, on the basis of those escrowed shares. I acknowledge there was a technical mistake as I saw it, but one, in my judgment, and you can disagree with this, was not should not send him out of the cabinet forever. Now, if we have new information that you've presented and others have presented subsequent to that, old Gumshoe here may have some more information that he wants to present. Obviously, they're spending the full extent of the intellectual energy of the Conservative Party trying to determine these things today, and they have every right to present this information today. And if there's new information, it's obvious that I have to take all of that information under advisement when I make any decisions that I have to make.
Final supplementary.
Speaker, another comment that Mr. Fontaine has made on more than one occasion is that in his judgment, and he made this statement well back soon after his appointment to the cabinet, in his judgment the conflict of interest guidelines were, as he put it, too strict, too tight, too tough. It's never been clear to me from the Premier's own statement whether as a result of Mr. Aird's survey he wants to see guidelines or a law, and again I'm not clear on which his preference is, which would be tighter or looser. I wonder if the Premier can tell us, do you want to see guidelines and laws that are stricter and tougher and more clearly enforceable, or do you want to see something which is much looser and which will allow the kind of thing which has gone on to persist?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, number one, I want to see them clearer. Number two, personally, and again I'm seeking independent advice in this matter, I would like to see an independent authority to advise on these matters and to adjudicate, to do the kind of cross-examination that you were talking about. I think all of us in public life do pay a price, and that's one of the realities, and indeed it's a price well worth paying for public service. I think we have to look at our own situation, the Executive Council, spouses, children, families. We may want to look at, and I noticed in the newspaper today, some of the member opposite, old Gumshoe, thinks that perhaps all members of this House should be involved in disclosure of some type or other. I think all those things should be included. But number one, I think we need certainty And as you know, anyone who's read those conflict of interest guidelines, and I take responsibility for this, for not bringing more precision into this whole matter. We want precision, we want independent adjudication that we can all agree on. And whether it's party leaders, whether it's all members of this House, I think that Ontario should be in the forefront. And with respect to your third point, should it be in law? I would be very happy to see this in law, not just a vague set of conflict of interest guidelines with no ongoing monitoring and or enforcement. I'd be very happy to see it the law of the land. I can tell you that would make everybody's life easier and something I have to believe.
New question. The member for York South.
Speaker, one of the things we'd like to see is certainty of enforcement, and that's not a problem of the guidelines, that's a problem of political will.
New question.
I'd like to ask the Premier, if I may, Mr. Speaker, a new question. The Premier will know, because it's our understanding that he's going to be in the Sioux tomorrow with a number of his colleagues, but he will know that a 2.8% layoff of the Sioux workforce is the equivalent of 51,500 jobs being lost in Toronto. It's difficult to convey the magnitude to people in southern Ontario of the crisis that's facing the North. I wonder if the Premier can give us an assurance that in whatever he says tomorrow, it will at least include a transfer of capital resources to the North, and in particular the establishment of a Northern Ontario fund which will inject capital on a regular basis, drawing funds from those companies that have made historically so much money out of the North, and that we will finally get some public assurance that those funds, in fact, will be reinvested into Northern Ontario.
The honourable member will be aware that already has been announced the doubling of the Northern Development Fund, which the honourable member may not think is adequate. There's no issue that's been more troubling to this government than the problems that we're all aware of in Northern Ontario, and I repeat again, some extremely fine work was done and constructive ideas through a number of the colleagues here in the House, and we value that advice. We will be in Sault Ste. Marie tomorrow, as has been a matter of public record for some time, to discuss some approaches to solving the problem as well as some specifics. I don't want to mislead my honourable friend to think that I go with a magic wand with all of the answers to the problems, because I don't have them. There's enormous problems in the steel industry, and the timber industry, a number of specific hotspots, as he knows. But we're very, very concerned about the ongoing viability of the North. And we take two approaches to the situation. Number one, if we don't address the structural problems, the competitive problems, then, Mr. Speaker, it's impossible to subsidize the situation forever and forever. Number two, we need a number of short-term responses that will address some of the specific problems. I think they have to go hand in hand, and that's the approach that we take. We've gleaned a lot of wisdom from Mr. Rosehart, some of his ideas that we will be moving on as members of this House, and indeed others will be following up in the future. But I think tomorrow, again, I don't want to mislead my honourable friend into thinking I've got all the solutions, but I think we have some approaches that are going to be significant in the long term.
Supplementary.
Well, can the Premier tell us whether he has accepted the argument of the Rosehart report that there should at least be a major health care facility in Northern Ontario, and in particular a medical school, in order to assure that, like many other jurisdictions in the world with which we share a significant North, we will in fact start reinvesting our human resources as well as our capital resources into Northern Ontario. Can you tell us whether that's going to be part of your announcement tomorrow?
Speaker, and the point that the honourable member makes about making sure that we have opportunities and invest in capital resource and human resource in Northern Ontario, of course, is a significant one. I know you would forgive me if I don't tell you today what we'll be announcing tomorrow. You wouldn't want me to give you advance notice of this kind of situation. You would? Oh, well, I'm surprised that you would want me to do that. But as I said, we're announcing a number of approaches, and there'll be more forthcoming. And once, may I just say, Mr. Speaker, in follow-up, this is one area where I think there's been remarkable cooperation of the members of this House. I think we all see it the same way, and the specific work done by a number of members, I think, deserves the credit of all of us in this House.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Premier, since you said that there's going to be an announcement tomorrow which will deal with the short term as well as with the long term, can he at least give us the assurance that the government has recognized that that same private sector, in particular the large
multinational big business private sector, which has historically gleaned such a profitable history of exploiting the resources of the North, will at least be required to reinvest resources today in Northern Ontario? And can he at least give us the assurance that the Sioux and Ear Falls and Wawa and those other communities that are being affected by layoff and by closure will in fact be compensated by means of a community adjustment funds which will be reinvested in those communities? Can you give us the assurance that we're going to see a transfer of capital back to the North, controlled by the North, and stop this pattern of exploitation and running, which has really hurt the northern economy so terribly over the last number of years?
Without debating the methodology, there's a number of those approaches inherent in our approach, and a number of those ideas that we will be diverting funds, taking funds that you can argue historically have been taken from the North and invest in the South, and a much higher proportion that's ever been spent historically in the North will be spent back there, and we can get into a historical argument about who took from who in the past. But I guess there's one difference of approach between this government approach and my honourable friend's approach. We're not looking for enemies. We're not looking to pillory somebody. We're not looking to blame someone for this problem, be it individuals, unions, or industry or multinationals. What we're looking for is a new cooperative approach to these problems, because we're all in this thing together. Every one of us in this House and everyone in Northern Ontario, everyone in this great province. And that's going to be the approach we're taking, and I think that you will find it somewhat satisfactory. I'm sure my honourable friend will argue tomorrow it's not enough. That would, no matter what I said, you would argue it's not enough, and that's fair enough. But I think you can be determined of our goodwill and our good faith to solve these problems together in the long term, not just the short term.
New question. The member for Cochrane South.
Doctors would like to hear that, Mr. Premier. I have a question for the Premier based on testimony before the Public Accounts Committee last Wednesday evening. During that particular session, Mary Eberts testified that back in June of 1985, information was gathered from all cabinet ministers or potential cabinet ministers with respect to their holdings and interests in private and public corporations. I'm wondering if the Premier can table today that information with respect to the Minister of Northern Development and Mines.
Premier?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm following the honourable member's questions. I understand that it had been tabled with all of its flaws in it.
Supplementary?
No. Mr. Speaker, I'll repeat the question to the Premier. Last Wednesday, Mary Eberts testified that she had obtained information in a written form with respect to the holdings in public and private corporations of all ministers or prospective cabinet ministers, and the following day indicated that it was in fact now lodged in your office. That was where the only copy was lodged in your office. And my question is, can you table today that those documents, not the declarations given through Mr. Blennis Wright, but declarations that you had, information you had in your hands last June the 26th, can you table that today with the House because you have it in your office? With respect to the Minister of Northern Development of Mines.
I say to the honourable member, as far as I know, that all appropriate information and all relevant information has been filed, indeed, as required under the laws. Now, if there are mistakes in that or you have extra information, surely ask those questions of the appropriate people in the circumstances, but as far as I know, it's all been filed.
New question, the member for Riverdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Housing. There has been a lot of righteous talk from this government concerning its interest in protecting affordable rental housing. There is mounting evidence day by day that the government has failed abysmally to provide that protection. What has the minister got to say, for instance, to Mrs. Marjorie Chapman, who's aged 86, whom this Friday the courts have told she will have to leave her lifelong home?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, it's very unfortunate when we have tenants who are losing their home, and I very much sympathize with the situation there. But on the other hand, the honourable member knows fully well that the action that we have taken as a government to introduce Bill 11, to have this Bill 11 enacted, to protect tenants who are faced with evictions that are caused by extensive renovation, by evictions, by demolition, people losing their home to demolitions. Mr. Speaker, we are very, very concerned about that, and that is why Bill 11 was here. We had hoped, Mr. Speaker, that both members of the opposition would have moved swiftly in debating Bill 11, but the approach actually that is being taken today, Mr. Speaker, is that there seems to be still delay, and the respective tenants will come, maybe facing these situations.
Mr. Speaker, that will not do. It is the government's responsibility to organize the agenda, and this government has sentenced thousands of tenants to a long, hot summer in a cold sweat. There is an alternative, Mr. Speaker. Given that the minister has repeatedly said that it was his government's intention that Bill 11 would be enforced by now, will the minister now abandon his stubborn refusal to make Bill 11 retroactive and commit his government clearly and unequivocally to making Bill 11 retroactive to protect tenants who are even now losing their homes?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know that what we have seen in the House here, that watching the debate of the doctor's bill, that took a considerable amount of time and patience. And also, Mr. Speaker, that, as I stated, Bill 11 came to the House and made the second. And we had hoped that the Bill 90 would have, the extra billing bill would have proceeded quickly so that we'd have Bill 11 here. I am prepared, Mr. Speaker, to stay in this House as long as possible, to have Bill 11 being enacted so we can protect all tenants that are faced with evictions from their home.
New question, the member for Middlesex.
Get the bill first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Agriculture and Food. It relates to a matter that was raised earlier this afternoon during member statements by the member from Durham, York. It results, Mr. Speaker, from a telephone call I received this morning from Reeve Jack Moyer of London Township in Middlesex. Reeve Moyer has informed me that Laws Insurance Brokers, a firm that has provided liability insurance coverage for many of the small rural fairs in this province, has advised the Ilderton Agricultural Society that it will be unable to renew its insurance policy that expires on August 1st. Could the Minister inform us of whatever steps his ministry has taken in addressing the insurance problems that face the fair boards across this province?
Minister.
Since this problem first surfaced, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the staff of the Rural Organization and Services branch of my ministry have been working closely with the fair boards and with the insurance companies. And I'm pleased to say that the insurance companies acting on behalf of the fair boards made application to the liability insurance pool, and it's my understanding that the pool has definitely indicated it will give coverage to all those fair boards which require it, will give liability coverage to all those fair boards who require it. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister of Financial Institutions for the assistance that he's rendered in this regard.
Supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to hear that fair boards will be able to receive liability insurance. As Mr. Speaker, I hope the member for Simcoe Centre, who indicated his lack of concern about the small rural fairs in this province, is as well. Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned, however, about the affordability of this liability insurance, and I wonder if the minister could tell us what the agricultural societies might expect to have to pay for insurance this summer.
Minister.
Well, the liability insurance pool has divided the fairs up into three classes: large, medium, and small. And I'm pleased to say that the coverage will be given to them at a most reasonable premium. In other words, they'll receive $1 million in liability insurance for a premium that ranges between $500 and the $1,000, and the fair boards will be notified, I would think within this week, as to what their coverage will cost them.
New question, the member for Sarnia.
Mr. Speaker, again to the Premier, I have some information I'd like to pass on to the Premier if I can get a page.
The big reading day,
By way of question.
By way of question to the Premier, last Thursday I raised with the Premier the issue of an article that appeared in the Northern Times. He indicated that he was not a regular reader of the Northern Times, so I provided him with a free copy at no charge. In that particular newspaper article, Mr. Premier, it indicates that the minister was quoted as saying that he resigned because, in fact, or that his resignation would take place if, in fact, Hearst did not receive the FMA. Since close to a week has passed now, or a matter of days has passed since the time that I raised this question, have you, in fact, talked to the minister and confirmed whether he resigned, the former minister, did he resign because of not receiving the FMA, or did he resign out of honor, as you stated in this House?
Premier, there is, to the best of my knowledge, very clearly resigned because of the charges made in this House with respect to Golden Tiger.
Supplementary.
The question very specifically was, did you talk to him about this matter, and could the Premier, in addressing that first question, also respond to the question as to the present status of the FMA for the Hearst area? I don't want to know the details, the confidentiality of the cabinet discussion, but whether or not that matter has been dealt with, whether any decision is forthcoming, and if so, when.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I did speak to him on, I guess, Friday last, and it's very clearly my impression, as I told you, that he resigned because of the charges made in this House on the mining shares. Now, that's the answer to your first question. The second question, with respect to the FMA, is the following. As you know, that FMA is being discussed for some 2 or 3 or 4 years. The former Minister of Natural Resources would know that from in the Hearst area. And I gather it's a joint FMA. There are several companies concerned and involves the entire region. Now, Mr. Speaker, we also know this House will be aware of the great controversy that surrounded the minister in the last little while, and suggestions were made here in the House and otherwise. And as you know, whatever decision the cabinet made on that matter would be suspect, and you would be the first one with your new research arm to suspecting that there was something untoward being made in this particular matter. It is no secret that he has an interest in United Sawmills, which is under a blind trust, but that still would not prevent a suspicious mind like your own from suggesting there was some, or many others, from something untoward. Now, and I know that you'll want to talk to the former Minister of Natural Resources, who has a different view of this, may have a different view of this situation. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is why, because of the very unique atmosphere that's applied to this, it is the view of the government that we should have completely independent advice on this matter. And that is the course that the government will take in this matter.
New question, the member for Windsor-Riverside.
Speaker, I have a question to the Minister of Health. The Minister will have had an opportunity by now to review the recommendations of the coroner's inquest into the 19 deaths at the London Extendicare home. I'd like to know if the Minister is satisfied, after reviewing the procedures and the recommendations, that with all of the conflicting information of whether doctors informed the Minister of Health, whether the staff doctor informed the medical officer of health locally, whether the minister is satisfied that this issue has been sufficiently dealt with, and whether or not he is prepared to recommend a public inquiry into this matter.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I think, as the honourable gentleman indicates, he knows that I have reviewed the initial release of information and the recommendations from the jury. As he knows, the official results of the coroner's inquest has not yet been brought to my ministry's attention, the final form of it. In any event, we're making inquiries to find out exactly when the final form recommendations will be delivered to us. I can tell the honourable gentleman that one of the items which constantly came out in the proceedings, which I watched with great interest and in which my ministry was very active, was that in fact there were communication difficulties of which I think led to confusion. I think that in the interim, some of the steps which we have taken with respect to reporting have already helped to address some of those deficiencies in communication, and I can tell the honourable gentleman that at this stage I have not looked at putting together a public inquiry with respect to a follow-up of the coroner's inquest.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just a matter of confusion or lack of communication. It's a matter that the facts are not entirely clear in this case either. Is the minister aware that one of the conflicting pieces of testimony, Dr. Michael Hickey, who was a consulting physician to London Extendicare, reported that he didn't even know that an outbreak had taken place several days after the outbreak had started, and that he learned about it by making his rounds in one of the local hospitals. At the same time, the director of nursing reports that she had told the doctor that the medical officer of health said there was no use in reporting this matter to the Ministry of Health because in past cases they didn't care. Doesn't the minister understand that if this tragedy involved any other group of people in our society, there would have been a more substantial response from the legislature and from the Ministry of Health?
Minister?
And shouldn't we now
Order.
be setting up a public inquiry to determine what caused this, what the circumstances were, and who was responsible?
Mr. Speaker, I think, as I told the honourable gentleman before, I have not determined that a public inquiry would assist us to any larger degree. We have not yet got the final text of the coroner's inquest report to us. I can tell the honourable gentleman, however, that the concerns raised about the communications, which was well reported and well documented, had caused me concern even at the time of the inquest, or at least of the deaths and the incidents occurring. And we had taken steps right away to ensure that, in fact, one of the first places that the reports were made was to the Ministry of Health, to the public, to the nursing homes branch, and to the public health branches, so that, in fact, our Chief Medical Officer of Health could respond at the initial phases of these events. We have made sure that, in fact, has occurred. It is working well now in events that have transpired since the Extendicare problem. I can tell the honourable gentleman that those difficulties, I think, now have resulted in us tightening up our communications, have tightened up the way in which the Ministry of Health works with local medical officers of health and other people who are required to respond first to these events. I can tell the honourable gentleman again that I have not determined that a public inquiry at this stage would assist us in unraveling any further the information which seems to have caused concern about who was communicating what to whom. I can tell the honourable gentleman, however, that I think our new communication directives have assisted.
Order. New question. The member for Brampton.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not certain if this question should be directed to the Minister of Corrections or the Attorney General. Perhaps I could start with the Minister of Corrections, and if he feels it appropriate, he could refer it to the Attorney General. Mr. Minister,
Place the question.
We've witnessed over the last little while reports of overcrowding jails due to the introduction of the Young Offenders Act and the implications of that act. And I would like to ask the Minister of Corrections...
Order.
I would like to ask the Minister of Corrections if the diversion program that's available under the Young Offenders Act has been implemented on either a pilot basis or if there is an intention of bringing it forward as an alternative to avoid the overcrowding of our jails.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am aware of one particular diversion program that has worked quite effectively in my own jurisdiction of Kingston and the Islands, but that is not paid for by the provincial government, but rather by another organization that is experimenting with alternatives to incarceration. The issue is one which does deserve fair merit and study by the government, and I personally believe that would be an excellent way to help reduce some of our population in our penal institutions.
Supplementary.
I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if I could ask by way of supplementary if there have been any reports done on any other provinces where this program has been introduced to determine whether or not that has had a significant impact on reducing the jail population.
Minister.
I'm not aware of those studies. They may very well be done. I'll attempt to find an answer to that through my ministry and report back unless the AG does happen, the Attorney General's office does happen to have that information, but I'll make it my responsibility to get an answer back.
New question. The member for Nipissing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple of points I'd like to raise with the Premier and ask by way of a question if he could inform the House as to any discussions either you or your office have had with Mr. Fontaine regarding any special severance arrangements during this hiatus.
Premier?
The honorable treasurer tells me that apparently when one resigns, there's half a year's pay coming, but he's declined that.
Is that what you mean?
Supplementary?
The question was, have you had any discussions? I gather you haven't, perhaps the treasurer has. The treasurer hasn't? Well, how come you coached the premier and the premier gave your answer?
Sean's away.
That's the question.
Do you have a supplementary?
Certainly I do, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to determine whether they have an answer to the question. The question was, have you had any discussions? I gather you haven't, and I gather the treasurer has. Let me ask you by way of supplementary. When you indicated that you did have discussions on, thank you, that you, because we're running short of funds to send these over, that you did have discussions on Friday with the former minister. In those discussions that you had on Friday, did the minister deny saying, quote, I had said that if Hearst didn't get this FMA that I would resign, end of quote?
Premier?
That's right, Mr. Speaker. That's not his recollection at all. But you'll want to ask him about this at the committee, I'm sure.
New question, the member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, there have been a number of published articles with respect to Mr. Fontaine. A question to the Premier. One of them from a reporter who taped a conversation with Mr. Martin, who is the president of Golden Tiger. Mr. Martin is quoted as saying that I forced him to sell them. That's referring to the shares. He didn't want to. The reporter asked why. Mr. Martin responded, he thought they would go up in price. I told him, Rene, you're a minister, you have to sell them. I'd like to ask the Premier, can you find an explanation for the delay in the decision to sell the shares from July to December? And can you tell us, do you consider that delay to be another example of what you have called a technical violation, when in fact the guidelines state very clearly that all these matters with respect to a blind trust are supposed to be resolved within a month of a minister assuming office?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, as I understand it, the filing is to be in 6 months after the original date. Now, I know of no reason this matter should not be investigated. You've asked me some questions that I think need scrutiny. Conversations with Mr. Martin, what they talked about, and anything you want to know should be asked. Frankly, I'm not in a position to explain things one way or the other.
Supplementary? Member for York South?
Perhaps the Premier, will the Premier be willing to appear before the committee and advise the House as to precisely what all the ballyhoo was about when he assumed office with respect to conflict of interest, what kinds of information was made available, and why it is, with respect to something as fundamental as this, it was not resolved? And, Mr. Speaker, can the Premier not confirm that the guidelines are quite specific and refer to the fact that these matters should be cleared up with respect to a blind trust as soon as possible upon the assumption of office?
Premier? Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly happy to share whatever knowledge I have of the situation. As you know, a lawyer was acting on the matter, as well as Mr. Wright, who looked at a number of these complicated situations and gave their judgment on the matter. And I think you have every right to know what judgments that I received. I can tell you that I did not personally cross-examine each minister of the Crown. I turned it over to others to find out if there's any violation of the conflict of interest guidelines. And you'll be aware that Bryden got advice from people. Now, you may not agree with the advice that they've got, and it speaks to, I think, the essential vagueness of some of these guidelines. But I'm happy to share what information I have on this matter. And as I said to my honorable friend, I think this entire matter should be scrutinized, and you're very happy to put your questions forward.
New question?
Order.
New question, the member for Mississauga East.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Transportation and Communications. Queen's Park sources have been quoted as saying that the UTDC sale will be finalized in the next 2 weeks. They've also said that substantial changes will be written into the final deal with Lavalin. Can the minister assure this House and the taxpayers of this province that they will see a return on their $167 million investment in the once prosperous corporation and not be left holding only substantial liabilities because of a bad business free fire sale deal made in haste by the Liberal government?
Minister.
Thank you, the same lady, Catherine Smee.
Mr. Speaker, it's very difficult to respond to unattributed sources, some Queen's Park source. But there certainly is no fire sale, Mr. Speaker. We are proceeding as quickly as we're able to. Very complicated procedure, as the member well knows. We're doing everything we can to retain the Canadian content, the Canadian jobs, research and development, and all of those principles we established some time ago.
Supplementary.
Appreciate the minister's confusion when it refers to a reliable government source. That's certainly a paradox right off the bat. The Liberal government, Mr. Minister, has continually branded UTDC as a white elephant. They've done it. It has become increasingly obvious through the mismanagement and incompetence that the Liberal government is making true on its accusations. The sale is past the point of salvaging, but will the minister assure us that he will negotiate a fair and reasonable price for this Crown Corporation and will not just give it away like a door prize at a school dance?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, by virtue of the fact that the principals from Lavalin are still negotiating, it's hardly past the point of no return, as the member is suggesting. And of course, we are doing everything possible to get the taxpayer in Ontario a fair deal.
New question. The member for Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Energy. In 1978, the Port Royal Commission called for a complete study of nuclear safety in the province of Ontario, independent of Hydro, AECL, and the AECB. In 1980, the Select Committee on Hydro Affairs, of which you were a member, called for the same kind of independent study. Last Thursday, the Select Committee on Energy, again for the third time, called for an independent study by internationally recognized experts of nuclear safety in the province of Ontario. Are you now prepared to commit yourself to seeing that study done?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased at the excellent report from the committee, and of course, as the member has pointed out, that particular issue has been raised on more than one occasion. I haven't made a decision as yet, but I must share with the honourable member the fact that that is one of the very important issues that we will be dealing with in the next short while, and I must say that I tend to feel that we will meet that commitment, but I have to have the rationale and do a bit of study before I can make the promise and share with the House the direction that we can go to assure you and all the people in Ontario that we indeed are concerned about the safety and that it should be done by another tribunal.
Supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps the minister can give us some kind of indication about when he will be responding to the report and that specific recommendation in the report, and can he assure us that the two opposition parties will be consulted about any independent study he decides to proceed with?
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly would give that undertaking that we shall, in fact, share with all members of this House the initiative that we would take to confirm the recommendation that was made by the committee.
New question. The member for York Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Community and Social Services. It arises from the estimates of July 3rd, 1986, when the Deputy Minister acknowledged that there were severe problems with the waiting list surrounding the VRS program for the handicapped. In fact, he stated the following: typically we are looking at about 11 to 19 or 20 weeks. We go up to 50 weeks, which is not good enough. We're talking about almost half a year to a year for some people who are on the vocational rehabilitating scheme to receive assistance. Will the Minister tell this House what plans he has with respect to revising the VRS program?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member will recall, there was a statement in the recent budget that additional funds have been allocated to my ministry for the physically disabled, and that is part of the resources that we will be applying to the situation which he described. I would remind the honourable member, however, as he has already been reminded, that a number of people who are on the waiting list are simply waiting to get into another program. They, in fact, have been served as far as they can be served by our vocation rehabilitation officers and are waiting to get into a program that has already been agreed on. So it isn't always a case of waiting to be seen, but rather a waiting to get into the program.
Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, we just don't want to sidestep the issue. We know there are extenuating circumstances in some cases, and yet the circumstances in others are leading people to a dead end when in fact the service is not there for them to get the direction and to get the assistance from these government offices. Will you take this under personal consideration and promise to do something about it? The deputy needs your help.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, there is no question about agreement between my deputy and myself as to where the shortcomings are. The member referred to one incident in the province where there was a very long waiting list. And the deputy and I discussed that shortly after we discovered it and have contacted our area office and asked that 2 VRS officers from the area office be transferred to that particular location to help cut that waiting list down. In another place in Northern Ontario, we have hired 2 additional people for a similar situation. We're aware of it, we're working on it, and there's no disagreement between us.
New question? The member for Bellwoods.
I have a question of the Minister of Labour with respect to the practices of the Workers' Compensation Board at the Downsview Centre. Is it customary, Mr. Minister, for injured workers to be discharged from the centre with a medical diagnosis of fit for regular work when they have never been examined by a physician prior to the discharge? And in fact, the reason for the discharge was that they were handing out a copy of an article that was published in the Toronto Daily Star.
Minister?
Well, obviously the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, has a specific instance in mind. I'd like to be made aware of that. I wouldn't think that any injured worker would be discharged as being fit for regular duty, fit to return to regular work without being fully examined and without it being determined that indeed that injured worker is fit to return to regular duty or indeed to any modified or light duty.
Supplementary?
I find it difficult that the chairman of the board hasn't brought to the attention of the minister the case of 2 registered nurses, Miss Follis and Miss Kelly, who on June the 4th, after complaining about the inadequacy of the rehabilitation program and having distributed copies of an article that had appeared in the Toronto Star, were told on June the 5th by the cashier that they were going to be discharged, and on the following day were told by Dr. Paisley, one of the staff doctors at the center, that they were going to be discharged for the medical reason, as I understand it, that they were handing out an article that was published in the Toronto Star. Will the minister report on this incident and advise the House what action he intends to take against physicians who give medical diagnosis on the basis of political criterion?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd be most pleased to take that question as notice and to get a report for the honourable member and for the House just as quickly as possible.
New question? The member for Burlington South.
I have a question for the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations. One of your election promises found their way into the throne speech. Specifically, I'm referring to the promise to introduce beer and wine sales in corner stores. Could the Minister advise the House of his current timetable for that legislation?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the decision as to when legislation is introduced in the House is really in the hands of the House Leader, and we will get to it when we can.
Mr.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. On June 25th, a community forum on this subject was held in the riding of Burlington South, and we were unable to obtain a speaker from any section of the government. We tried the Premier's office, we even tried the member from Essex South, from your office. No one was willing to talk about this legislation. Accordingly, at that public hearing, Mr. Speaker,
Order. You do have a supplementary?
I'm getting to my supplementary.
Good.
The citizens of Burlington, since you were unwilling to come to Burlington to give your side of the story, they wanted you to listen to a tape and watch a tape of the proceeding that evening. I'll send that over with one of the pages.
Minister?
Now, my question, my supplementary question.
Order. You asked the minister if he would look at the tape. No?
Asked that I give the tape to the minister.
Well, place your question quickly.
Since my supplementary question is, if you're unwilling to come to Burlington or to talk in any public forum, will you at least now admit that you've given a sober second thought to this issue and that you agree that it's bad legislation and you withdraw any plans for introducing the bill?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I should tell the member, and without bragging, that I practically go anywhere that I'm invited to. And I have been out just as a bit of statistics. I would like to give some statistics to my honorable friends on the other side. In the 12 months prior to my assumption of the ministry, there were 4 ministers, 2 of which were the same person, and in that period of time, they addressed less than 12 groups. In 8 months, I addressed 70 groups.
Hear, hear.
So you guys were talking and sleeping. So to suggest that I'm not available just doesn't make any sense. I'd be delighted to debate the question anytime, anywhere, as long as it can be scheduled.
Hear, hear. You guys... Order. 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 Time for oral questions has expired.